This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Rabanzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. So, as you know, I love sharing my personal experience and the things I'm learning from other musicians and songwriters here on the podcast. And you also know that you can be privy to those learnings by joining the Unstarving Musician community. In the process, you probably also know you'll be supporting this podcast. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com to join. In doing so, you'll get an email from me usually every 7 to 10 days with tips, hacks, insights, tricks, all the things you need to know to make your music journey a little better and brighter. And you'll also get a free gift from me, a token of my appreciation for being part of the Unstarving Musician movement. My guest for this episode is singer, songwriter, producer Tony Harrah, who was introduced to me by Abe Partridge, another great singer, songwriter, and former guest of this podcast. Thank you, Abe. As Tony and I were setting up for the call, I was asking him questions about his website. I was kind of curious about what he had going on there and didn't anticipate including it in the episode. But during that line of questioning, we stumbled on to conversations surrounding a huge life event in Tony's life. His situation and resilience make for a really moving conversation, as does the rest of our conversation. Tony shares a lot of good stuff from his life and music experience. At the end of our episode, you will hear a track of his called Last Words of a Good Man. Great track. And without further ado, I'm just going to get right into it. Please enjoy my conversation with Tony Harrah. Quick question before we get started, unless the two of us decide we want to go include it. I don't know that I would want to necessarily, but I was going to ask you about your Bandzoogle, about using Bandzoogle. I saw your website and I asked because I'm always kind of curious about people that are using things like Bandzoogle, and in your case, I was curious to know if it was new or if you've kind of, because I noticed there are some places that aren't updated, and I thought, well, maybe it's just kind of like wrapping your arms around everything you have going on. So how has it been, and how long have you been using it?
Yeah, I set that up initially. I've had a lot of things happen in the last year. I set that up initially in 2017, and my publicist was going to take care of it and finish all of that. And then in the interim of that, my wife passed away unexpectedly and suddenly. Of course, she was 33 and from a blood clot. And so I've got 3 young boys. And so the website was pretty much the first thing that got I was scrambling. I had to cancel a tour. And then, but I was set out and already paid to be at a bunch of places in Nashville. So to record the next record last November, not this past the one before. And so I spent that time just trying to get the record done and reestablishing how I was going to get out and play and make money. And so the website kind of is still needing updated. But as far as Bandzoogle goes, the part of it I did on my own, I think I pay like $14 a month or something stupid cheap. It's not expensive. And it gives me everything from a huge email list, an email blast, to, I can adapt, they have thousands and thousands of pre-made themes, and then you can go in and very meticulously adapt and change and, shape those themes. And then, hyperlinks are all automatic. It's real easy. And then you actually link it to Big Cartel for your merch and stuff. So it actually, someone else recommended it to me. Why, and just said, well, my upright bass player, just said, hey man, a lot of people, and he's an IT guy, that this is really good. So I just went with it, and it's super user friendly. So I couldn't be happier with what it is. I just haven't had a chance to update it in quite a while. So hopefully that will be taken care of in the next month, actually.
Yeah, very cool. I'm very sorry to hear about your wife. Is that just by chance? Do you want to, as we started talking about the Bandzoogle stuff, I thought, we can just go and include this. Do you by chance want to include that and talk about it a little bit, or rather
yeah, we can, because the record that I recorded wasn't directly revolved around that. Of course, the record was already written, but oddly enough, the record really speaks to a lot of that situation, indirectly and directly, oddly enough. And so the theme about death and redemption and loss was really heavy theme through the album, and it wasn't intended to be that way. But kind of looking back, it was kind of a weird, oddly God coincidence that the record was so much themed around an upcoming loss that I didn't know I was going to have, So I think it kind of gives weight. And the fact of my publicist, I think there's some things in the single and the bio that's going to be in the press release that probably revolves around that somewhat. So no, that's fine. We can talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll just, we're kind of rolling as the saying goes. So if I can weave in what we've already talked about, it'll stay there. So that happened in 2017, you said?
Yeah, it was right after I'd gotten off a string of shows and was just got a pedal steel player and kind of reshaped my backing band and was getting ready to set out on a tour in late September through most of October, or so about 3.5 weeks. And anyways, I'd gotten home from rehearsal late one evening, about 11 o'clock, and she was up hanging out, and she was a school teacher, and so she was up kind of late waiting on me. And we had a beer before we went to bed, and she said her back hurt really bad. And we have like 3 kids who always slept in bed with her, so I slept on the couch half the time. And so I went downstairs and made some leftovers and went to bed. And then in the morning, she hadn't gotten up for school, and I didn't get up as early as her, but realized that she should have, and went up there and found her up there. And so it was a blood clot in her lung that we just didn't know, And so that really changed the dynamic of what I was doing, because I had, immediately, of course, I had 3 boys to raise on my own, and I had to cancel that tour. And then in November, I was slotted to be in Nashville for 2 weeks, another 2 weeks in December. And then I represented West Virginia in the International Blues Showcase in Memphis 2 years in a row, and that was going to be my second year in that January. So I was going to be in Memphis for a week, and then another week in January back in Nashville to master the record, or mix it rather. And then the mastering, which I didn't have to be a part of, was going to be done sometime in February. So everything from shows getting canceled to, well, I guess I won't play any shows the rest of the year. We'll just focus on making the record. My mom, offering to help watch the kids back at home while I did that. And, of course, a variety of friends and family that rallied around to help me, try to get the record done, and then trying to figure out what my next move would be musically, if any. Obviously I just, with the future uncertain at that point, and my life kind of crushed and toppled on top of me. I really wasn't sure where I was going to land in 2018.
Sure. How old are your boys?
My boys are 9, 5, and 3. So when it happened, they were just 8 and had just turned 4, and one hadn't even turned 2 yet. So still in diapers, So
yeah,
I went from dad and musician to like Mr. Mom and Dad and musician at the same time, and trying to be. So it was a real harsh adjustment for a while, but I've found that the extra time I've spent with my boys and the closeness we've gained through the 4 of us, has been really amazing over the last year and a half. And it's not a good trade-off in any shape or form, but for them to lose their mother. But we have grown a bond that I think is special only because of that reason, And they, my son, in fact, when we went down for the second trip in December, I took my oldest son, who was 8, and loves to play harmonica. And so I talked to my pedal steel player, who also produced the record, about having him play on one of the tracks, and one of the tracks is Sweet Lucinda, which was my late wife's favorite song, and kind of meandered in and out of parts of our own life a little bit in small ways. And so we had Julian come to the studio, which is my oldest son. We had Julian come to the studio and play sort of like avant-garde harmonica in the key of C sharp, which the song was in. And then we also let him, we were kind of doing some orchestrated noise towards the end of the song, some really heavy tension coming out of the solo. So we let him play the harmonica on it and play, the black keys on the piano, and then do some percussion in that part. So he got to be a part of the record, which probably wouldn't have been something we'd have thought about doing or had done, had that not have happened, So it was really cool for him. Like, he got to go to Nashville and record in a professional studio when he was 8 years old, which I know a lot of kids probably can't say.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, as much as things can resume to a semblance of normalcy, do you feel like it's kind of gotten there? It when you talk, and I realize we just sort of met today here online, but do you feel like things are returning to a sense of normalcy for you and the voice and music and all that?
Yeah, you think, I'm a really level-headed person, and I've dealt with death, unfortunately, quite a bit in my life, and I don't have a whole lot of family left, and I've seen a lot of friends go way too early, and so, I don't want to say I'm callous to it, but I definitely, there's an understanding, and I try to pull my faith into that, because I am a person of faith, but I try to remember that, we're not promised anything. Nobody was ever promised tomorrow or even the rest of today, in fact, and try to look at it logically. But, looking back in the last year and a half, I had my head in the clouds, just kind of lost.
Sure.
And then even more odd was that, several months later, God kind of puts this like lovely woman in my life who had gone through divorce and had been married, about the same amount of time I had, and she was starting her life over, and I was starting my life over. And the last thing either one of us needed was someone and their kids kind of involved, you know what I mean? And just trying to figure it out. But somehow or another, we fell in love. And in fact, when I was down in Memphis in late January of 2018, she flew down there for a couple of days just to support me and be there for me. And so she has 2 children, and I have 3. And so we kind of rallied in our own sort of sadness and getting our life back together. And throughout that, found that we both loved each other's kids quite a bit. And we actually got together and took them to Disney World, 5 kids and 2 adults to Disney World, and then to the beach. So we were gone almost 2 weeks. In the midsummer, I took some time off. And so God has an odd way in my mind of, taking things away, or I don't know if it's taking things away, but things happen that, out of our control, but then kind of like sending you a boat in a way that you don't see coming. And so sometimes in life, you just have to go with it, and I wrote a song somewhat in the early part of 2018. That's going on my next record that I'm getting ready to start recording, where I said, sometimes you got to sink rather than swim, as opposed to fighting the current. Sometimes you just got to let it take you where it goes. And so I've kind of ran 2018 in that manner. The last part of 17 was just kind of surviving, but in 18, I was determined to figure life back out. And so, I fell in love again, and she's a wonderful woman, and we have a great, relationship. We have a great time with our kids, and, I hope to see that, grow more and more and more. And, the boys and I got a routine down. I mean, I'm not very organized. I think that might work around a lot of musicians, or artists at least, but I'm not very organized. And so I had to almost just anal retentive about everything to get organized. And finally I got a routine down, and it was able to, all right, this, I got the kids back, in school, and they do this, and, I can still get them to basketball games, and I still coach Little League baseball. And then, I didn't tour really at all in 18, but my saving grace was I had a lot of really nice large scale showcase shows in West Virginia and some of the surrounding territories in Kentucky and Ohio. And so I tried to make the best of those and tried to focus on what I was going to do with the record, shopping it around to a couple record labels. The downside of that being, I can't tour, 5-6 months out of the year. Gone 3 weeks, home 2 weeks, gone 3 weeks, home 2 weeks, like I could without basically leaving my children alone half the year. And when their, birth mother is there, they don't feel like the family unit has been, pulled apart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to really look at myself and say, what can I do in my career to still make a living? How to supplement that, and then what can I do to not abandon my children to where they don't feel like, mom's gone and now dad's gone, and raised by grandparents half the year while I'm gone all the time. And I it took me a while to really come to terms with it'll just have to be what it is. And, there's that story about Rick Moranis, when his wife died of cancer, he just dropped out of Hollywood and raised his children. Like he just quit. And, but I'm not in the financial situation that Rick Moranis was in. So, that's not necessarily the easiest of answers either, but So I tried to make the best of it. Some record labels weren't interested in the record anymore because my inability to upfront that I just can't tour, just tour the hell out of it. I just can't. And so I've been working with a couple small record labels who see more merit in the music, where we can do TV and ad placement, picking the right shows, picking the right tours, doing 2 or 3 or 4 tours a year for a couple of weeks, and making the most out of what we can do. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it. And coming out of 2018, I wanted to release Unicorns is the name of the record we recorded in Nashville. It was going to release in fall of this year, but I've had to push it back. And with the work with my publicist, which is Public Display in Portland, Oregon, we're going to release it in May of this year. And so there won't be a long time between that record and my following record I'm getting ready to record. That'll come out in early 2020. So everything's back to normal, as, like my brother, I think, told me, it's a new normal. You go through your life in this normalcy, and then some large major life event changes it, and it's a new normal. And so we're back to normal. I've got my head back where it should be. I've got things figured out at home, and we're getting ready to start kicking butt again and try to make the most of, the music that I'm making.
Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing the story. It's obviously very personal, and I appreciate it. When we, at the very outset of our conversation, we were talking about your website and Bandzoogle, and you mentioned your publicist, who you just mentioned again. How did you find Public Display?
Well, oddly enough, I had been offered a record deal to record my last record, Unicorns, and my late wife and I sat down and talked about it for a while. And, what does the record label offer you? And I have a studio that I released my second record with, Oklahoma Blues, and I recorded that and produced it and engineered it myself, and was very proud of that record. And so, her argument was, what are they offering you? You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
What are they offering you, since you have a studio and you have all that money that we have completely thrown into that thing? So the argument was, what are they offering you? And I was like, well, publicist and, radio promotion and legitimacy, obviously. And she said, well, is it contractually guaranteed? I was like, no, but a publicist and all that stuff, it's kind of in their best interest. And she's like, so the only thing they're really, that you're really contracting is to record a record in which they take part of the money for, you'll have to recoup. She's like, so couldn't you just hire your own publicist? And I was like, well, a publicist is like any other outfit. They have to believe in you, and if they don't believe in you, you can't pay them anyways. I mean, they have to have their own clout. And if you're not, on that level. So basically, under her encouragement, I decided to send out some emails with a link to my current record, Oklahoma Blues, that had just released 3 months before in February 2017. This was about May of 17. Mm-hmm. And I got 3 responses. Of all the people I sent to, I got 3 responses back. And a couple of them were more along the lines of, yeah, we could probably work with this, but, it'd be X amount of dollars, we'd like to hear your next record, blah, 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 blah. But it was more along the lines of, yeah, I think if you threw us the cash, we'd do something for you. But Public Display wrote back within 24 hours. And that being said, they're 3 hours behind me. So really, I sent theirs out at 10 o'clock at night. And by noon the next day, which was 9 a.m., I got an email back, which was, we were blown away by Oklahoma Blues. Obviously that record's out, but if your new record isn't anything on par with that, we would love to work with you in the future. And actually no talk of money whatsoever about how much their services were. So after several conversations, I asked them questions like, how many people do you take on? Do you take on anybody writes? And she's like, we, out of about every 100 phone calls we get, or every 100 offers we get, we accept maybe 4. And so, I felt that they were choosy about who they brought on, and therefore they liked me. So I figured if they liked what I did and they're choosy about it, then I feel like they're going to work hard for me. And so we negotiated, and then around the time that my wife passed, I called them and told them, we're going to do the record. I don't know if it's going to take longer, but da-da-da-da. And so basically they were like, no worries, and stayed in contact, just seeing how I was doing personally. And we had many, many talks over until the middle of 18, around June, when we actually finally signed with them. And so they stayed in my corner the whole time with no money involved. So I really felt like I found some, Sierra and Alex Hager are the owners of the Public State PR. And they are just absolutely wonderful people. And so it's a small firm, and they know the people in the industry, and I just couldn't feel more like family with them. So that's how I found them, just random my chance. And what kept me was their attitude towards the industry in general. So it was great.
Yeah, that's cool. And it sounds like you certainly found some new fans, judging by the description of how they responded to you. If you don't mind my asking, how did you go about crafting your email? Was there prior experience? Was this a first time thing? Was there anything special that you think you said in those emails that went out that got you the responses that you did get?
No, honestly, I hate to say it, like, I kind of stopped caring, if that helps. Like, the whole, I don't give a shit kind of attitude sometimes goes a long way. Like, when I was a younger musician, I would try to really write these very well-spoken emails, very formal and very, almost as if I was my own business manager,
Mm-hmm.
And I would get like zero responses, whether it was trying to book an out-of-state venue for a tour on my own, or whether it was trying to speak to a record label and get them, if they selected, they took unsolicited materials and I didn't have a talent lawyer, but I would get no responses. And so the more calloused I got to the industry, my emails, were like, hey, my name's Tony Harrah. This is a record I wrote and it's out. I'm going to record another one. If you're interested in working with me, great. If not, thank you for your time, and a link. And I got way better responses from that. And I think the other thing is the people in the industry are busy and they see this stuff all the time and they don't have a lot of time to read. And I've heard that from other people, like, don't make your bios 10 pages long, because it sounds like you're trying to sell somebody snake oil.
Sure.
You know what I mean? If you have to go that far into explaining your record or yourself or your career to make it sound like you're Bruce Springsteen, you're probably not Bruce Springsteen, and probably on the complete antithesis of it. So I find that, there's a part of the industry that says it's all about selling yourself. You're not really so much selling your music as you're selling yourself and who you are. And for me, I think my music, I try to be as honest with it as possible. And so my music is selling me. But if you just are just blatantly honest and don't give them a bunch of BS lines and, let the links speak for themselves. If they like it, they weren't going to be like, this music's great, but, his email was too short. And they're not going to be like, man, his music's terrible. But I mean, what a nicely penned letter. You know what I mean? Right.
Yes.
So like, if they want your money and they know you want to pay them and they believe in the music, they don't care if your email said, hey, here's this, whatever. I mean, they're going to, so just save your time and just be honest and curt with it and just send them a link. And I got a way better response with that. I mean, just almost night and day. So
I love that. And I think that is great advice and just something to think about, to not to get too wrapped up around the axle of your ego with trying to make yourself sound like something you may not be. And,
right.
I really, we have been referring to your last release, Oklahoma Blues. When Abe Partridge, by the way, who we should talk about for a second, but when I went back to the two releases that are currently on Spotify, Oklahoma Blues and was it $2 Suit? Yeah.
That is correct. Yeah.
I just, from an opening track perspective, I hear a big difference. I guess for me, I was going to use the word traditional blues, but that's not really accurate. But this sort of blues in a band form comes through in the opening track of $2 Suit, which it looks like you released in 2016. And Oklahoma Blues has this great acoustic blues, maybe more of a roots type of approach. What made the difference in the two approaches, and assuming you do feel that they were notably different approaches to the two albums?
They were staunchly different approaches to the albums. And how that happened was I'd been out of music for several years and started a family and all that, and wasn't really sure if I'd ever be back in music again. I'd lived in Nashville and I'd done the independent label thing, and small time label, you know, just getting gigs touring around the Midwest and Missouri and Tennessee. And I moved home and kind of thought I'd put that behind me, that I would just, you know, play music, you know, at campfires and around the house. And at one point I decided I was just going to really focus on playing piano and just play jazz and blues for my own right, just for fun, you know. And I think my wife at the time already was looking at me going like, oh God, here we go again, you know. And so I started a little jazz band that was just on covers. We were doing some Mingus tunes. I mean, we did some blues. We did a lot of Tom Waits and some Ray Charles. And I had a sax player and a drummer and a bassist and me on piano, and that was it. And it was super cool. It's called Park Wherever. And the guys in the band, we were just doing it for fun, and we were playing like smoky old bar rooms and kind of like jazz events. It was a real hoot, you know. But I could already feel myself wanting to get back to writing, and some of the members didn't really want to go down that avenue of just doing that in writing. And so I wrote the album $2 Suit in about a month in January of 16. And decided I would find members that wanted to play that album. Like, you know, I always felt like, and every time you get into a band situation, everybody has all these different ideas. And so my idea was, I'm the band leader. This is the direction I want to go. I have the demos of this record. Like, this is the idea I want to do. If you don't like this record, then you're not going to like this band. And so I hooked up with a producer named Matt Hale from West Virginia, who is a much better piano player than me. And the drummer from Park Wherever, Alex Long, became the drummer for that band, as well as my current band until this past year. And I got a really, really good harmonica player, better than me, named Mark Coppola, and a guitarist named Jeff Bogus, who is currently my guitar player now. And then I went through two bass players. Eric Hayde was my first. My second one was Anders Bush, who is still currently my upright and electric bass player. And so we recorded that record in May in 3 days, 1 day to track, second day to overdub, and third day for vocals. And that was it. We were done. We put like 20 hours into that record, maybe. And we were really happy with it. We didn't want it to be perfect. We wanted it to sound like old, just off the cuff. All the solos were done impromptu. You know, everything was done just, let's just give it heart, you know? Mm-hmm. And so coming off the heels of that, you know, I play about 10 or 12 instruments, but I don't play any of them like a virtuoso at all. And basically enough to where I could set it on the rhythm with a jam band, and I wouldn't be doing anything dumb. But if somebody said, take a ride, I'm not the best lead player of any of those instruments. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I was always a good writer. I had a book published when I was 19. I've written poetry and songs for years and years. And so the more I wrote, the more I felt like blues was trapping me in the fact that either I have a really great backing band and I'm writing really cool lyrics, but my solo game was weak in the fact that I don't have the ability to really make the guitar sing outside of those lyrics. And I felt like blues was really limiting me on the ability of how to write lyrics, you know, just mm-hmm. the 1, 4, and 5.
Right.
So some songs I'd written at the end of 2016 had more of Americana feel, but still bluesy. And my harmonica player was one that told me, he said, man, you're a great blues guy, you know, and everything, but your heart and your soul and your music writing really excels in this Americana country folk genre. And really, man, you know, I know that's where your heart is in your words. You ought to stick with that, you know. And so it was upon that idea that I decided I would kind of bridge a gap and release Oklahoma Blues as a solo record. And there was still some like Delta Roots blues stuff on it that I wrote, but then stuff that was clearly more Americana folk, and it didn't have a big traditional blues band behind it. We added some banjo to some stuff. We still had the harmonica, but that harmonica kind of goes both ways in those genres. And try to let it be more down home, just roots music, not even blues, just roots music. And I named it Oklahoma Blues to still give it a semblance of what I'd done before. And then hoping by the time I put out my third record that I could be, you know, and I made the joke before that you can be a folk musician and play blues. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You can be an Americana artist and play blues, and you can be a country artist and play blues, but you can't be a blues artist and play those three things. Like, people expect you when you say you're a blues artist to be blues. And so I felt like as much as I like blues, and that was what I'd done for a long time, it would be better to be a folk artist and play some bluesy tunes and do some roots blues than to be a blues artist. People were like, did he just play a country song?
Yeah.
And so it didn't really match the other way. So I had to kind of break that. And even today, that really, I mean, I've been a blues musician for a long time, that it was really hard to break that. Even so, I get calls all the time, like, you know, they're having a big, huge month-long festival in Charleston, and they're like, hey, we're bringing a riverboat in from Cincinnati. You know, it's a blues cruise. We want your band to, you know, play the blues cruise. And I was like, man, that sounds like a whole lot of fun. But I'm not really blues, you know, in that sense. And they're like, that'll be fine, man. Yeah, you're blues. I was like, y'all heard me? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And so still, like when I did Live on the Levee in Charleston, which is a big street, they've got a gigantic stage and they bring in national headliners for it. And they were trying to pair me up with a blues musician. I mean, they were just like, well, we're either going to put you on this date or this date. That's the nights that we have some national blues acts coming in. So I was like, you know, at this point, I'm so cool. I don't say, I'm just like, all right, great. Wherever you want to put me, it's fine. But so I wanted to really leave just the blues genre. So by the time I get to my third record, I could do whatever I wanted. And it wouldn't seem really off kilter that I jumped genres in some way, you know.
Do you feel like you're going to dig your heels in a little harder with the Americana roots thing, or are you going to, you know, bend the horizons a little more with the with unicorns?
No, I mean, you know, I never really want to really cross genre. I mean, I guess maybe a cliche of every musician is nobody wants to be labeled in a genre,
sure.
But you have to put the record somewhere in the store, you know? And so, I definitely wrote a folk record, you know, and I gotten to where like so many people say Americana and some people, say, you know, alt country or whatever it's been used to describe it over the years, that I just say I'm a folk artist now, you know, like I'm a singer songwriter. I write songs. My words are my stories. I write stories about blue collar people. I write stories about downtrodden, about, you know, situations of loss and love and, you know, redemption and God and the devil. And so I write stories back with a good tune and a melody, hopefully, you know. And so I really wanted to let that shine. So when Unicorns came, like, you know, there's a song in there that is, we all piled around a couple of condenser mics in the studio and just did it open bluegrass style. And we don't have a banjo on it, but we've definitely got a flat top guitar picking, and we've got the fiddle and an upright bass. And so we obviously couldn't release that song as a single because it would have been completely the odd duck on the record. But then one of the songs on the new record called Father's Daughters, I do, you know, on the piano, and it's just me and a piano with a really light amount of fiddle in the background and my harmonica sparsely in the middle. And so it's definitely what I would call, you know, an Americana record if I wanted to place it somewhere. But it rocks a little bit, I guess, in some songs. But I don't really want to leave that genre so much as, you know, any more than, I mean, my favorite records are like Guy Clark and Springsteen's solo records and, you know, John Moreland and Abe Partridge, you know, and he's one of my favorite songwriters. And I want to keep most of my records pretty clean, like those kind of records. And I want elements of all sorts of cool things in them, but I don't think I want to go back to trying to rock or trying to really, you know, blow the groove out of the water with the band any longer. You know what I mean? I want the band, but I want it to all serve the song, just to be part of the story of the song itself, you know?
Sure.
If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, completely. Well, speaking of Abe, and yeah, he's a great songwriter.
I thought I'd segue for you. I thought I'd help you out.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny, I had his name here, Abe. Okay, so I just put him below $2 suit. Yeah, how did you guys meet?
So the first time I represented West Virginia in the International Blues Showcase in Memphis, he was representing Alabama. And a friend of mine was representing a northern part of West Virginia. It's actually the Mid-Ohio Valley area. And anyways, he won there. And so me and him went down. He was a solo artist. I was there with my band, the Putnam Prohibition, with all the aforementioned guys that we talked about that made $2 suit. And my buddy Chris. Oh man, I just, you know what? I'll skip that for a minute. Chris Sutton, my gosh, we toured together. He's a great solo blues guy. He's a great guitar picker. He's phenomenal. And he's got a voice that carries for days and days. Well, he was at this little venue called Blue Note. That was his venue for the week during the showcase and competition. And my drummer was down there watching Chris one night while I was somewhere else. And he said, dude, there's a guy in here that should be paying you rights to your voice. And, because my first couple of records, I was real gravelly and I was still a little, unsure about myself getting back into singing. And if I could really, I'm a baritone. So belting out tenor parts was really scary. So I was a real gravelly singer and I still am in a lot of ways. But anyways, I go in and there's this guy, Abe Partridge. And I missed his set and introduced myself to him. And so we traded off. He came and saw me the next night and I came and saw him. And this guy was not blues whatsoever. I mean, I always say this, you know, is your music blues? I mean, hell, it's sad. I mean, does that help? I mean, if that's blues and and same way with Abe. So we go there and there's a couple traditional blues guys from Indianapolis that I know. And I'm sitting there with them. And Abe belts into the Ghost of Mobile. And of course, that wasn't on his record at the time. White Trash Lipstick was the only record he had out. And I look at this guy and I said, it ain't blues, but it's awesome. And the other guy goes, man, it's something. I'll tell you that for sure. And so afterwards, I go up to Abe and I'm like, dude, we got to trade info, you know, keep up with each other. So I get home and I hadn't been home from Memphis maybe a week and we were already talking. And he sent me some working tapes of what he was doing in Nashville for his record, Cotton Fields and Blood for Days. And at that time didn't even have a title. And I was completely blown away. So I sent him Oklahoma Blues, which wasn't going to release for another 2 or 3 weeks. And so I think we just both had a mutual admiration for one another. And then later on that year, in 2017, he invited me into this songwriting group he was in out of Austin. And he said, you know, I said, I would love to get in on something like that. He said, you know, you write a song a week, you miss, you get one pass, after that you're out forever. And it keeps you honest. And I wasn't sure if I could write on a prompt type of thing. And I always kind of wrote songs when God gave them to me. And he said, I'm not the gatekeeper, but I'll try to get you in at some point. So he got me in. And then so we got to see each other's writing manifest. And so 90% of Unicorns came out of that group.
Oh, wow. And who ran that group, by the way?
I don't know who ran it originally. And what happened was, is at some point, Abe took over as the admin for it. And so Abe ran it the last 2 years. And then now I've been running it the last, I wouldn't say the last year, but most of this last year. And so I know Abe's been really busy. And so hopefully this spring, he was going to get with me and he's going to take it back over and we're going to kind of redo it and kind of get things back where it needed to be. I think 70% of his record is from that as well.
I'll be darned. I asked because I'm trying to remember who. I do know the name Ray Prim came up, but someone I had on the podcast talked about a songwriting group in Austin, and there are probably so many, but I was just kind of curious if it happened to be the same folks. But continue, please.
No, well, yeah, and I don't know where it came from, and I never really, because I didn't know Abe really well at the time. We really got to know each other through the group. And so we started private messaging each other about what we liked about each other's songs. And like, I was blown away with where he was going because his song Colors came out of that group. I know for sure. Mm-hmm. And then of course we were trading off some touring. And at this point it was all coming down his way. And then I called him, told him my wife had passed away and I had to cancel the tour. And he and everybody in that songwriting group, and that songwriting group right now comprised of about 20 people. But at that time they were scattered all over the U.S. There was a guy in Scottsdale, Arizona. There was somebody way out California. There was some members up my way up north. There were some members way deep down in the south, some in Florida. And we'd all kind of got to know each other through this group. Anyways, he raised a whole bunch of money from those guys to send to me and my family. And I think at that point is when Abe became family. And so I didn't get to go down and tour that fall, but then he told me he was coming up this way in 2018. And he came and stayed with me for about 4 days, and I scheduled us some shows between a few cities, and we played all those together. And he came and stayed with me for a while, and then we had a high old time, man, and I showed him around the town, and we did a bunch of stuff and cooked a bunch of good Southern food for him. And then he came back in September, and then he came back in December, and we played shows each time together. And then he's coming back in February to do his theater show. It's a 2-night theater show with songwriters in the round and then a headline. And I'm going to be one of the songwriters in the round with some other regional notables. And he's going to headline one of those nights since he's coming so far. And then I'm touring down there in March, coming down to Mobile to do Unhand the Monster podcast in the listening room of Mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing that it's a podcast for an hour and then a live performance for an hour. Both are going to be to a live audience. I'm doing that on March 11th, Monday, March 11th. So Abe's putting me up. So at this point, we just become just family to each other. And it's just crazy how that works. You know, I mean, I couldn't imagine my life without him now. You know,
he seems like a special guy for sure. I feel really lucky to have met him and had him on the podcast, and in talking about him with some of my other guests, which he was so kind to introduce me to. He's obviously very well liked, and understandably so. That's a good story. Good story.
Yeah.
So I think you just said this, but you're in Charleston, West Virginia, yes?
I am. Charleston, West Virginia, yes, sir.
And so where did you start your younger years? It wasn't in Charleston, was it? Or was it?
Start my younger years of life or in music?
Yeah. In life. Where were you born, or where were you raised? Or?
Born and raised in Charleston, West Virginia.
I'll be darned. Okay.
Well, and I say that I was actually born and raised in a city between Charleston and Huntington. Huntington and Charleston are two major metropolises, and I use that term with an asterisk. We have about 1.2 million people in the state. So Charleston and Huntington both. Charleston maybe has 100,000. Maybe Huntington has 50, and those are our biggest cities.
And it sounds like you have a vibrant music scene there too.
We have, yeah, and both scenes are great. Huntington has always flourished a little more, and Huntington right now is going crazy because also with the Appalachian area of having Kentucky within 10 miles of Huntington, West Virginia. You're getting all that, Tyler Childers. I've played shows with Tyler Childers. All the guys around here played shows with Tyler Childers. I mean, like he was sort of like an adopted West Virginia son, because, he was a local Huntington guy because it's so close to Kentucky. So all these big names coming out of Kentucky right now, have played in Huntington and Huntington. So that scene is just really tearing it up right now. But I grew up right between Charleston and Huntington, a little town called Scott Depot. But for most people, not having a lot of major cities, my dad taught me at a young age to just say Charleston, West Virginia. It's a lot easier. People know where that's at. So,
yeah, absolutely. I want to jump back to something we talked about briefly in the beginning of our conversation, and that was trying to remember how you put it, but because of the changes in your life, you had to think about how you're going to, I guess, put the career back together or make it continue to work under a new normal, as you said. I was kind of curious, and I think listeners would be curious to know how the financial and career changes or whatever. And I don't really mean financially per se, like, oh, how's it going since you had to change, but more like what kinds of things are you doing or thinking about doing, or have you done that you feel have been helpful in the tide of a big change in your life?
I had always intended to lend out my studio and do some production work for engineering. And I'm not necessarily set up for large bands. I do, I can accommodate small trios, and then from there I can overdub, and I have a lot of great equipment. And, I've got some old Rhodes and a Hammond B3, and, I've got some really legit stuff. And I decided to lend myself out more to helping some younger artists who didn't have a ton of money to pay in a huge studio, to help them make some recordings, and then therefore obviously helping myself make some money and provide a reasonably good record, and I'd use Oklahoma Blues as my reference that I recorded that and mixed and mastered it myself. And, I can do it at a fraction of the cost because I don't know anything on it, and I can make some money there. And, I had to also start looking at my touring patterns and my show patterns and say, there's a lot of those exposure gigs everybody does when you tour. You take some gas money gigs, everybody does, unless you're huge. I don't care who you are. If they say they don't do it, they're lying. Everybody takes gas money gigs. Everybody does the whole, well, I haven't played in this town in a little while. I should go up there and play, even if it's a dead venue and nobody comes regardless who plays. You know what I mean? Like, there was a venue in Charleston I played all the time. And, you know, even DJ Barham from American Aquarium came there and like 30 people came out to it. And I remember being so just disappointed for him. You know, it's like, my God, man, he's like one of the best songwriters out there right now, you know, and American Aquarium is completely killing it. And you can't get people to come out there. It's like, do I go out there on a Wednesday night to play for, you know, 5 or 6 people because I need to keep an appearance up in that town? Or do I just say, I'll stay home, work in the studio, keep sharpening my, you know, my edges for something bigger and better, and then just hold off for the good gigs? And there's that double-edged sword where it's like, well, if you don't play the gigs to keep your name in the hat all the time, then you don't get offered the big gigs. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So there's this like weird edge that you've got to kind of teeter on, which is like, okay, I'm not going to go away from my kids, spend a bunch of money just to go play a show that nets me nothing. No exposure, no money, no, you know what I mean? It's just almost kind of worthless just to say I played a show to scratch the itch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, scratch the itch somewhere else. Go work in the studio. You know, go back and hone your skills there. You know, the next time you make a record, when you record it, you know, learn something new about your microphones or your compressor that you're using on your rack, and you know, make your next record better. You know, or something like that. Don't just go out and play shows that mean nothing. And then luckily, everybody in my area knows who I am already. And so I don't have to really make a huge name for myself as far as, you know, they know I'm around. They know that I'll be playing soon. So actually, I found that the less I played at those venues, you know, the more people would come out and see me when I did. And I wasn't overexposing myself. So that helped. The financial side, like I said, like doing more studio work has helped a lot. I'm not really a gun for hire kind of guy. As I talked about before, unless somebody just needs a good rhythm piano player, and I don't know who's really looking for that. So, you know, I've peppered in other things that I do to keep everything going. You know, I'm a carpenter, and I used to own a construction company for years, so I do a lot of custom woodworking. And there's another artist in West Virginia who's doing very, very well, and he does the same thing. He lives about 3 hours from me, and he makes custom woodworking and stuff, and mantels and furniture. And we joke that we've got like literally the identical life, like almost identically, almost in every way. So I've supplemented a little bit of that stuff that I wasn't doing as much anymore when I was touring all the time. You know, kind of come back to doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And which has been fun, man, because, you know, like, you know, I can't spend my whole life touring anymore. And so you find the things at home to say, I don't have my financial situation is, you know, I mean, my house is paid off, my cars are paid off, and I don't have a ton, you know, but I got to look for a future for my kids. So like I said, I don't take the gigs that don't do anything. And it doesn't mean money. I mean, it doesn't mean I don't play if there's no money involved. I play plenty of shows where there's no money involved or I don't take them. But as opposed to taking the show that 5 people are going to show up at regardless, you know, on a Wednesday night at 10 o'clock to 1 in the morning, which is not a good gig anywhere. As opposed to doing those, because I would do them just to be out there. It's like, I'll wait and I'll do a house show at this farm where they do these house shows, the Caldwell Farms in Barbersville. I've been helping them set up a Sunday social like the Frog Pond does down in Mobile. And it's going really well, and I won't take any money from them right now because they're close friends of mine, and they've been working at this for a couple of years, and I've been helping them do the booking. And but I really get a great amount of people that are there as a listening room. So I'll go play that for free anytime. Because then I'll sell merch and people want, you know, they'll come back and they're engaging as fans other places I play. So I'll do those, but I just start not, I don't know, holding my worth at a higher value.
Sure. Nothing wrong with that.
Right. And it just boils down to, I have X amount of time to apply to this. I can do 3 tours a year. Well, let's not do a really crappy tour. Let's hold off and let's do one overseas for a couple of weeks, and let's do one that really hits the markets that they really do well every time I go, and not just tour for the sake of touring or playing a show for the sake of playing a show. I've got X amount of time. Let's make them count.
Sure.
And I wish I'd have done that years ago.
That you know what? Well, you lead me to another question, but before I ask, and this is flying by really fast. I know we're about to wrap up here, but I'll ask the first one that you didn't prompt me for. But what's your favorite merch that you mentioned that some of these shows you'll sell merch? What's your favorite merch, or what's your either because you just are proud of it, or it's like a good mover, a great supplement to the whatever you're doing.
I mean, honestly, I think shirts are always the best thing to go. And like buttons and koozies and stickers are always great. And I love that stuff. And a lot of times I'll just hand that stuff out. Mm-hmm. Shirts are always the thing that like people can like wear and enjoy. And it doesn't always have to have, like I've got a hat on right now that says Pop Country's for Posers with Abe's signature underneath it. And so a buddy of mine who's a musician was in a band of mine years and years ago is a great graphic designer in Cincinnati. His name's Justin McCormick. And his thing was, when a band shirt comes along, it should be a cool shirt. It shouldn't just have your name slathered over the front of it for shameless self-promotion. Because the problem is, I won't wear that crap. You know what I mean? Like I'll buy the shirt to support the musician, but then I probably won't wear the shirt. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so the shirt has to be cool, even if your name is your logo. It needs to be a cool shirt. And so we had some shirts designed for our single Sweet Lucinda, and it's this really cool 50s tattoo flash kind of thing, this big old Turkish knife with the roses and stuff around it. It says Sweet Lucinda in the banners, and it was like a 10-layer screen print on this like heathered gray, and it's super cool, and people love it, man. And then our other shirt, that we're selling right now is it's an army green with the kind of the mustard yellow, like old 80s camp style t-shirt. Mm-hmm. And it's got the logo. It just says Tony Harrah in the Flyover States American Music with like an old guitar kind of silhouette on it. So it's not really just throwing my name, because the Sweet Lucinda one just has my name like really small at the bottom of it, kind of like Abe's thing. And so I'm getting ready to do a new run of shirts, which will just have either like parts of my lyrics or cool statements. Like I'm not going to divulge my next record name because I'm really super happy with it, and I don't want anybody to steal it between there and now, because it's going to be my merch campaign too. But that's where I'm going to go with it. So yeah, I think shirts, man, because that's my favorite thing to buy. That's my favorite thing to sell. That's a walking billboard.
So I know that TonyHarrah.com, and it's, for those of you that want to check it out, is TonyHarrah is your probably your hub for all things online, and you're on all the socials, it looks like. But where does one find those shirts online if they want to see what they look like and maybe buy one?
So I'm getting my big cartel set up right now, and if anybody wants to get them before I get that going, because like I said, the publicist, we were going to redo all of that. If anybody wants to, you can always email me at TonyHarrahBlues@gmail.com, or hit me up on any of the socials, and then I accept PayPal through Tony Harrah Music, and then you can always PayPal me, and then I'll ship those out. So obviously, and I can provide pictures and sizing and all that stuff on there. So in between, cool. Just get a hold of me, and I'll mail them right out to you.
If you have pictures of them, send them to me when we're done. I want to see them, and I'll go ahead and share them in the show notes for the podcast. And then, because you kind of alluded to it, I'll go ahead and ask you one of these kind of things I often reserve for a follow-up, because it's fun to see what people will write back. But if you were starting your music journey over from the beginning, what, if anything, would you do differently?
Oh, man. Boy, we'd need another hour for that, wouldn't we? I think ultimately I would be more confident in myself. And I say that not just because of me personally, as advice for anyone else. I didn't start singing ever in a band until $2 Suit was the first time I ever sang on a record in my life. Oh, wow. I always wrote songs as a lead guitarist or a rhythm guitarist in bands. I wrote songs for bands. I always had a singer sing them, and nobody ever captured what I wanted out of them. And in my head, I could hear myself with all these nuances and getting quiet and being breathy and really selling the room with a story about this farmer I wrote about, and almost having people believe that I am that farmer, Mm-hmm. And I loved that out of Springsteen, and I wanted to do it. And I was so scared, and people would laugh at me when I try to sing because I didn't practice it. And so when I finally came out and I literally said, I've got a gravelly, deep voice. By God, if Tom Waits can do it, then you know what? If somebody likes Tom Waits, then somebody can like me. And I'm in no way a songwriter like Tom Waits, but just on the voice end, he's got a gravelly, deep voice. If people like that, then nobody can hate me too much. And then the more I sang, the more I found that my range improved. And then one day somebody said to me, I remember the first time somebody said, like, dude, I love your voice. And I was like, who in the hell are they talking to? And since then, I've gotten so many people that say that a lot of my draw will be my voice,
sure.
And it's my vocals.
Sure.
And so if I'd have just had that confidence years ago when I was a musician before, who knows where my songwriting and I would be now. So, you know, my advice and my own advice is be more confident, man. Be proud of what you do, but just don't be an arrogant ass about it. But I mean, be confident about what you do and realize that we're all going to have highs and lows. I think about quitting this thing every other day, and I've done that since I started being a musician. So, I mean, you just got to have confidence to press through and go, you know what? Maybe they didn't like me tonight. That's fine. I don't care. Somebody else in another town will like me. I know it. It's happened before. It's going to happen again. Just roll with it, you know. Be proud of what you do.
I think that is wonderful advice. Appreciate you sharing it. Tony, this went by really fast, and I very much appreciate you spending time with me. I'm glad that we got to meet.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to digging into your music some more. I will be talking to you really soon. So thanks again, man.
All right. Thank you very much.
Daddy said a Buick was a fine automobile. It's like a Cadillac, but an honest feel. Never let metal define who you are. It's built with your two hands, it's more than just a car. Remember, whiskey ain't the answer. They can offer some good advice. You don't draw from the well in the morning, my son. His wisdom comes late at night. Kept his word, kept them close to me. Kept them much more than the memories. Words I recall out on Highway 49. 1,000 miles to nowhere, Georgia on my mind. So I stopped for gas and a bite to eat. Grabbed his checkbook from the folds between the seats. Signed my name on the line that he worked for. She put my coffee on the counter and I broke down at the door. Remember, whiskey ain't the answer. They can offer some good advice. You don't draw from the well in the morning, my son. His wisdom comes late at night. Don't forget to call your mother. Tell you all that she's got left. Take your time, don't live life too fast. Hug your children while you still can. Remember, whiskey ain't the answer. They can offer some good advice. You don't draw from the well in the morning, my son. And its wisdom comes late at night. And don't forget to call your mother. You know you're all that she's got left. Take your time. Don't live life too fast. Hug your children while you still can. The last words of a good man.
Hey, thanks for listening. Question for you. Are you struggling to move your music journey forward? I can help. If not personally, then by referring you to the next best available resources. Schedule a free 15-minute call with me to find out if I can indeed help you. It's easy. Just visit unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to schedule your call today. Look for links to just about everything covered in this episode in the show notes at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. This episode was powered by the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, How to Get Booked and Paid What You're Worth Over and Over Again. It's available on paperback, Kindle, and ebooks just about everywhere you can find them. It's also available as a standalone podcast called the Unstarving Musician's Guide podcast. You can learn more about the book and companion podcast at unstarvingmusician.com/book. I'd love it if you picked up a copy and would love it even more if you left a review. With much gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.